We got some awesome sunshine yesterday. Hope you guys got out in the yard or enjoyed the weather. And I think I enjoyed it a little too much. By the time I came in, I think it was a little hotter, and we were just talking. I'm like, man, I'm whooped. And then I think it was my daughter said, well, it was almost 90 degrees out there this afternoon. I'm like, well, I guess that's true. It was pretty much like summer. And but it's great being outside and having some sunshine after what we've been through here lately. But anyway, won't you bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Lord, this awesome sunshine that you've bestowed upon us this weekend, and just help us to enjoy that glory today and be reminded of you and what you do for us. Lord, be with us as we discuss these passages today and learn more about you and your Son, and just let the Holy Spirit be upon us that we can delve into this and learn something or be reminded of something we already knew and just be lifted up. Thank you so much for Jesus and his sacrifice. In his name, amen. So, I normally I try to look at other stuff, and my main source of the internet is my phone. And, we hear about people that, maybe they had a vision issue or something like that, or they're dyslexic, and then when it finally gets corrected, then they realize, man, I could see the chalkboard in school, or all these sorts of things. There's information that they're not getting, or when we get older and we get hard of hearing, and we kind of shake our head, was that important? I don't think so, so I'll just nod yes and move on, and hopefully it wasn't an important statement, and that somebody really wanted my response to, but we're not getting all the information. Well, in a rush to get to a meeting earlier this past week, I dropped my phone in the driveway. Do you ever feel like you're not getting all the information when you try to look something up? Anyway, so I didn't rely much on my phone. I was talking to Steve yesterday. But we shouldn't need to rely on our phones, right? It's a nice tool, but that is what it is, I guess. But anyway, so we're going to be looking at Matthew 24 today. And the lesson's kind of broken down into two parts. And the first part is Jesus foretelling the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, and the second part is the second coming of Jesus. And so anyway, first I'm going to read one of the additional scriptures as it's outlined in the lesson plan. You don't necessarily have to turn to this, but Daniel 9:27. And Daniel 9:27 is, it says, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7, but in the middle of the 7 he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, and one who causes desolation will place abomination on a wing of the temple until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. So we see that prophecy of some of the things Jesus is going to be talking about. So anyway, the setup, of course, if you've been here, you should remember, although I'm not sure I remembered until I started reading through it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, we studied that. But Jesus has been in the temple and over the last couple chapters, and he's been talking with all the Jewish leaders, and they've been trying to grill him and get some trip him up or something like that, and you remember he continually sort of he just kind of shuts them up, right? They're smart enough to realize when they've kind of been had, but they're not really brave enough to do the right thing. And there was one line in some of those verses. I think it was in 22 or 23, and it says something to the effect of one guy who was well versed in the law or whatever. And I was kind of reminded when I read that of some old attorneys that I've encountered in my days, and how they were well versed in the law. They were very well versed in the law, but yet they would paint themselves into a corner very quickly. And it's kind of funny to me how somebody who might have had a lot more experience than me, but trying to get me to say something or do something that, or to admit to something that I maybe didn't do, or to just muddy the water in such a way that it sways a jury or a judge in a hearing. And it's funny when you sit there and you realize, as I don't know that Jesus thought it was funny, but he had to just be shaking his head, like, I'm way ahead of you guys, because sometimes you're like that. You know what I knew what I had done. I knew I'd done everything right, and here I was on trial. Well, I wasn't on trial, but it felt like it. And then you have some guy who's got 20 years of experience over me, and you're just watching him paint himself into a corner, and he's not going to be. He's going to be embarrassed at the end of the day, and that's kind of. So I see some similarities, with even today how courts and things happen. So anyway, Jesus finishes up at he finishes up in the temple, and you can kind of imagine they're done, they're leaving at this point, and then we get into chapter 24. Does anybody want to read? I want to read chapter 24 through. We'll go through verse 3. Go ahead.
Then Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down." Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And when will the sign of your coming and the end of the age?"
Okay. What age are they talking about here? Is that like a modern age, like the age or generation?
The time, like basically the time before the Messiah versus the time after the Messiah, right? Is kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, you're pretty much right. So in Matthew 23:36, he says, "I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation." And so he's talking about, those current events, those things that are happening right at that time period. And so he's getting ready to, tell them what's going on. So Jesus answered the question in verse 4. He says, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and I will deceive many, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nations, the kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of the birth pains." Now, it's kind of interesting, and I think these have been taken out of context from time to time. But even though he's talking about a specific time that's coming very soon in this day and age, I'm always fascinated by how things in the Bible, even though they may not necessarily be talking about us, they still foreshadow life. And I've probably said this before, but I'm always amazed at how a current generation is always quick to look down at a past generation, whether it be our parents, our grandparents, or 2,000 years ago. And the Bible always shows us that these people were just as intelligent. The only difference between them and us were, well, this. You know, if you brought them back here, or if you shipped them a bunch of cell phones, put up a couple towers in Jerusalem in Jesus' time, in a matter of a few weeks, they'd all be texting each other, and they'd probably be glued to these things walking around, right? And so we forget that, you know, socially they were exactly like us. We're no better, we're no smarter. We have more knowledge because we have the benefit of time, but then what do? You know, we read through this, and Jesus is telling them at this time there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, there's going to be famines, there's going to be earthquakes, there's going to be all these things, and nation will rise against nation. But I think there's something that we can not think that this is what's coming for us, you know, because I always hear, inevitably, some of my, you know, my friends that aren't, you know, maybe work friends that are fairly religious, it seems like someone will make some indication about, you know, things in the Bible that, don't you think that, you know, these things in the Bible, that things are about to come to pass? And actually, I think just in the last week, I said, well, no, I don't. I said, I don't want to get into a big, long biblical discussion and get off on a tangent and maybe upset somebody. It's not worth it in this context. I said, but I think virtually everything that we read in the Bible, that we give some assignment to some future event, our future event is something that happened here. And fortunately, the conversation didn't go any farther. I don't know what their ideas were on that, but yeah, so just recently somebody was like making reference to some of this stuff and how they thought it, you know, in their mind, it may be referring to something coming, something that may be pertinent to us. We see wars in Europe currently, and, you know, and those things are pretty terrifying, but unlike some people, it doesn't mean the end of the world is coming per se, because those are the signs. So then verse 9, then you will be handed over to be persecuted and be put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Do we see that sometimes, you know, and even in today, even though he's talking about a different time, when you have this increase of wickedness that we see in the world, or it appears, I think by most of our observations, that things have slipped from maybe where they were. Whether that's true or not, I guess it's up to interpretation, but I personally think it's probably true to some extent. But that increase in wickedness, and then the love of most will grow cold. You know, think about how we get, maybe not just the world, but, you know, maybe we get frustrated, so we're just like throwing a towel, you know, and you kind of stop loving people because you feel that hatred, right? And so it's easy to do, but even though, again, he may not necessarily be talking exactly about us, you know, it's something that we need to guard against. But then verse 13, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy places the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one of the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. In those days if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, didn't we just talk about the elect? For the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "There he is," do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you ahead of time. Don't want to get ahead of myself. So if anyone tells you, there he is, let's see, there he is out in the desert, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. I think I did go maybe one over what we wanted before we get into the next part. I did look up something that was, and I don't know if this is more on the next section, but when the Romans took Jerusalem and finally did take the temple down in 70 A.D., has anyone ever? Now I'm kind of, well, I don't want to paint myself as some kind of historian, but I do, read, every now and then if something about a battle or a certain war or something comes up, I'll look it up and try to and just kind of see what some of the information was on that. And if you look something up, like on Wikipedia, it'll give like a list. It'll say like the combatants, so it'll have the combatants on there, and it may have a little flag icon, so you can see who was allied with who and who was fighting and in that particular war or battle. And then if it has the information, it'll give casualties and things like that. And over the years, I've seen several of those, and oftentimes it'll say about how many people were involved, and then and how many casualties there were. Well, this was the first time where it listed approximately, they weren't sure, probably 70,000 Romans attacked Jerusalem. And then there was two factions of the Jewish part. There was like the Zealots, and then there was like the Jewish government type people, the Sadducees, Pharisees, and all those types. And so they listed about 10 to 20,000 on one of the Jewish sections, and about 10 or 15,000 on the other. And so it was like Jewish rebels that had like held the temple, I think, if my reading was correct. Does that sound about kind of glossed over history? But this was the first time I ever read where it said casualties, and under the Romans it says unknown, but we know they took the city. So we know they probably took some losses, but under the other two captions, the number for casualties or for dead was the same as the number of people that were there. So the Romans killed everybody. There were no survivors. And so, when we see down here, I think we'll get to it, it talks about, basically everything was destroyed. And actually, it's in the lesson plan. Hey. So the destruction of the temple after Christ in 70 A.D., the temple in Jerusalem was looted and burned by the Romans armies under Titus' rule. All genealogical records except those of Jesus in Matthew 1 and Luke 3 were burned up in the temple. This event made it impossible for the Jews to practice their religion, as the priesthood depended on these genealogical records. Christianity is the only acceptable way to the Father. That's what I guess the conclusion was on that. That at that point, they didn't even have the ability to really even practice, their religion, as it relates to the temple. And only Christianity's genealogy was left. So, kind of interesting, it tells you that how, Jesus said not one stone will be left, and that kind of emphasizes that, there was nothing, it was completely destroyed. Also, just on the timeline, so these things are happening, according to this, on Tuesday before Jesus' death on Friday. So, just for an idea when this is kind of taking place. So, what did Jesus tell his disciples would happen to the temple? I guess we just covered all that in Matthew 24:2. He says,
it's interesting because the book of Revelations is really an encouraging book for the Christians when that was happening.
right,
Because Jesus said it was going to happen 70 years later. It was happening. And that book of Revelations is an encouragement to them. Stand tall. It's going to be destroyed. You're going to have to go through this. And
Yep.
so people get it all wrong and make it sound like it's about our end when God comes back. There's some of that, but most of it is about that.
yeah,
And if they could connect it, that's where we get our theology so off in different religions. They like to, talk about modern day prophets and all that crazy stuff. But Jesus warned them, this is what's going to happen. He plays it right out for us.
yep, absolutely.
It does happen. Stand close. Trust me,
Well, it's interesting, it's been a while since we've had I know sometimes Revelations is definitely, I think, tough to teach in a lot of ways. But, I don't know, we might be coming into a time to have a talk on Revelations. We've got some new folks, and maybe we don't know, everything that, they're bringing to the table. And, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And people try to assign that to our modern day. I remember 30 years ago when we went to war in the Middle East the first time, I heard a lot of people like, well, this is it. This is just meeting all the prophecies. And, fortunately, I feel blessed to be going here in a place that never looked at it that way, and we're not alone, but there's certainly, there are a lot of people that still look at that. I remember a friend years ago, and we were talking, and she was going through some hard times and divorce and different things like that, and she had little kids at that time. And she said something about the 144,000 or something, and this sort of thing, and I'm like, I don't think that's exactly right. But I didn't have a Bible in my hand, and I didn't have a functional cell phone that had Google on it or anything like that at that time, and so I just kind of left it lay there. But I did go home, and I cracked open the Bible, and I said, you know what? These conversations are going to pop up, and I wasn't ready. And I'm often still not ready, but at least I went home and I started reading Revelations, and I read it through a couple times, and I'm like, wow, that is just not what it says. It's pretty clear, really. If you go at it with a reasonably open mind, it's pretty clear that that is not what it's talking about. And it's a very easy thing to sort of unravel, you know. And it amazes me. And we have to guard against, right? We have to guard against just walking in, you know, to the building and sitting there and listening and you know, I think we've been blessed here. I've been around here for a while, and I think largely we're pretty blessed in the Church of Christ to have very reasonable teachings, you know, and where people aren't sort of swayed by whatever doctrine's coming from, you know. No. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, and even the mechanics of it, that's kind of the way my mind works. It's like, okay, 144,000, and then we'll just go with that so we don't get off on too much of a tangent. But if you look at the description of the size of the New Jerusalem in Revelations, then it gives everybody like a vast amount of space to stand on. If there's only 144,000 people in the space that the New Jerusalem is outlined in Revelations, then you won't have to worry about social distancing. Let's just say, and so there's just things that just don't, when you try to assign some kind of physicality to it, it doesn't mesh very well. It doesn't really make any kind of logical sense. So it's definitely, yeah. Oh, really? Surely in the history of the world, there's already been 144,000 people that have beat me. Yeah, that have beat me to it. Well, if that's the case, I'm going to try to take over the world. Right? Well, and I think, obviously with the war in Ukraine, we see somebody who is, we've been brought up on thinking that it's not that we want to go to war or anything like that, but we see this army that we've been kind of afraid of, right? And a lot of people thought that he was going to walk into Ukraine, and there was nothing that made us believe that the Russian army would not just, like they even said, he'll probably take the capital in 3 days or something like that. Sounded logical to, I think, most of us. And then we found out, looks like maybe there's some people praying for Ukraine. It didn't happen that way. And we see this army that we thought was awesome struggle now for 2 months. Now we don't know what the future will hold, but what's Putin doing to keep the armies? We know he can't. We now know that initially they're like, well, what if he invades Poland, and then what if he does this, and then it's going to be like the Second World War II. Here we go, right? And it's going to be this horrible thing, and he's going to. Well, now we know that he doesn't have the ability to go any farther than what he's doing. So what's he doing? He's holding us hostage. I got nuclear bombs. I can destroy everybody with these nuclear bombs. Don't mess with me because I'll do it. I'll do it. Maybe he will do it. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I just thought to myself when people, they say these things, they're like, you know what? I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of that. That's a horrible thing, and it would be horrible, probably more horrible to survive than to die in such a terrible fate. But the Lord didn't say Vladimir Putin was going to destroy the world. That's not how it works. It's not his to destroy. And even though he may have the ability to create a situation that will, destroy unimaginable amounts of people and lives and things here on earth, that's not how the world ends. Jesus doesn't come back riding on one of Putin's nuclear weapons. So I gave something like, maybe he will, maybe he won't. Personally, I think he won't, but that's not how it works. That's not what the Bible tells us. It's not how it's going to happen. And, what our leadership does with that, I'm just glad I'm not the one making the decisions, but that's not something we need to be afraid of, and because that's not what we're taught. That's not how it's going to go down. And so we've kind of touched on the next part, so I'm going to read on through here real quick, and because we're actually running out of time. Let's see, so we left off here, I think on verse 30. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. Verse 36, no one knows about the day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, and one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch because sentence right on it. Therefore, keep watch because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants of his household to give them their food in the proper time? It will be good for the servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat the fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place where the hypocrites were. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, I think those are great, as they should be, great examples, and how often I personally can really visualize the drunk servant. He's completely lost all track of time, and he's sitting around, and then the master comes home. He's like, "Whoa, didn't expect you to be here," and that's how we get sometimes, right? Um, so some of the questions. Yes or no, when Jesus returns, will everybody be able to see him? Verse 30, at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all of the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds in the sky. So yeah, everybody. What is the thing which Jesus said would not be destroyed? That's right. Verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The time when Jesus returns will be in the days of blank. Matthew 24, 37 and 39. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage. Up to that day, Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So it'll be like in the time of Noah. So why are we to always be ready? Because you never know. Hell is referred to as a place including which of the following? Friendships, gnashing of teeth, love or weeping. Gnashing of teeth. And again, some of the things that I've heard from some folks, some of the stuff I've seen some churches have some shakeups, and even talked with some of our newer members here, and there seems to be I don't know if you want to call it a movement or a feeling, or people are kind of like they're not talking about hell anymore or something, or they don't believe in hell, or they don't want to preach on hell. And I've seen this in a couple different places, talking with some folks. Actually, I think the minister where my parents go, that was one of the things that they started. They've had some issues and things, and that was one of the things. And I don't know, where do you think that comes from?
People not talking about hell as much?
Well, there seems to be a movement. I don't know if that would you call it a movement or just a philosophy?
Feel good. It's all about the feel good.
Yeah.
Jesus loves us. We're going to heaven, and we're going to make lots of money, and I have beautiful clothes, and my house is gorgeous. And guess what? It's, one day I might wake up and I'd be paralyzed or something.
Yeah.
The Lord says so. You know, be ready. And yeah, it's no.
Well, the bottom line is we're told, we're told how these, we're told this place exists. It's right here in red, right? But Jesus tells us that these places exist. So I'm not sure what that movement's about, but but that exists out there. So, and I think you're absolutely right.
Well, he said, my word never passes away. What I say stands.
That's right.
And they're not going and reading the word.
Yep. Well, thanks, folks, for your input and everything. And
I have your question. You know, it's really funny.
Rick, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
See you.
Or turn this off, let's start conversation.